I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, of Jamaican heritage. My parents both immigrated here from Jamaica. Close-knit family, a lot of cousins that we were very close to in physical proximity as well as relationship. Grew up with my cousins kind of like brothers and sisters and stuff. We had a lot of family get-togethers and stuff.
What made you come to Texas after?
I came down here with my husband who was in love with animals, four-legged animals, and he came down here to work with animals.
How was your experience in Texas so far?
I've had a very up and down experience in Texas. We first moved into San Antonio, lived in San Antonio for a while. He had a hard time finding a job. We ended up moving out of the San Antonio area into Comal County, where we did deal with a lot of racism up in that area. Very conservative, very white Anglo neighborhood. So, yeah.
Do you have a specific story?
There were stories I can remember when we were looking to buy property because we wanted to have land. His grandfather, my husband's grandfather, had always told him that was important for us, people of color, to have property, to have land. And so when we were in the position that we could, we were looking to buy a house, he wanted to get something with a couple of acres at least. And so we did have a lot of experience with realtors not wanting to take us to certain areas or taking us to show us. I remember one instance, my husband got annoyed because he took us to an area that, being from the city and not really knowing a lot, I didn't realize, but he did, that it was an area that flooded a lot. And so they were selling it, and it was like, okay, well, this is a perfect place to build and do all this. And my husband's like, no, this area floods. You can look at the rocks and tell because they're washed over. And, and just different things where even when we went to realtors to look at properties, they would take us to places that are like, okay, no, we don't want this. Or would tell us, well, no, they don't have anything available, when we knew, in fact, that they did have stuff available, So instances like that we dealt with.
And how did that make you feel?
Upset, angry that in 1990s, that type of thing was still happening, we've dealt with a lot of different stuff because we left New York, we moved to Alabama when he went to Tuskegee, and we dealt with a lot of stuff there. In Tuskegee, the Klan would have a rally and then go down the main highway in full white robes and everything, Saturday afternoon. And that was in 1980s. And I remember thinking, if this is 1980, I can't even imagine what it must have been like in the 50s, and in the 60s with Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all those people that were dealing back then. And this is 1980, mid-80s, and the same stuff is still happening, so that was just upsetting.
How important is it for you to share this story today?
I think it's important because I think the only way that we're going to be able to deal with what's going on in this country, and now in 2019, the racism that's still prevalent going on, the only way that we as a people, not just people of color, but people on this planet, are going to be able to overcome this is by talking about it and sharing experiences. And they're both good and bad experiences. And we have to be able to talk about it. And white people have to be able to understand where we're coming from and have to accept the fact that this is in fact history and you can't change history. This is what happened. And okay, yes, you may not like it, no, you were not part of what happened then, but you're part of what's happening now. And so you have to change your behavior and change the institution behavior, because racism is now deeply embedded in our institution so that people don't even realize what's going on because it's kind of just normal everyday occurrences. And the only way we're going to get past this is by discussing it and talking to each other as people.
How have your experiences shaped your ideas or beliefs in society?
Um, my mother has always told me I always look at the bright side of things, and I try to. Sometimes it just is difficult when you see things going on and you realize that in the course of a lifetime, not much has changed. I mean, the fact that a couple of years ago in Texas, someone is being dragged behind a truck is the same thing that would have happened 100 years ago. And so where are we going from there? We as people of color have to feel proud of ourselves. I think that's one of the things that slavery took from us, is that we don't know our history. And I think that because they're not going to teach us in school, it's not something that they're going to teach us. It's something that we have to teach ourselves. We have to learn our history of African people, and we are African people. We have to understand that we are from kings and queens. Our history did not start with slavery. Our slavery interrupted our history. We are a great people, and we have to remember that. Coming up, I didn't come up and learning that. I learned that later. I always had pride in myself. I guess with my West Indian roots, it makes me think a little differently than a lot of Southern Americans do, because Jamaica has its own society. And so I know that played a difference. But we're all from the same place. We all have to understand our greatness. I think once we get to that, we will start feeling better about ourselves as a people and be able to take our rightful place in this universe.
That's very true. Have you shared these experiences with anyone else while you was going through it, or?
Yeah, we've talked to family, and friends. I mean, my husband was very vocal, and so yes, I would have loved for him to have been here, because he would have been able to share a lot of experiences that he went through. Even up north, he went to a private school and had a lot of experiences that definitely affected him. Not always in a very net positive manner. He held a lot of that anger in. And so, yeah, we've talked about it, talked about it amongst family, talked about it amongst friends, even had some of our white friends in talking to them and them not understanding some of the things that have happened. And then finally, I remember one incident, my husband and a friend of his went into a store, and my husband's like, okay, he would talk to him about how black people get followed when they're in the store. And the guy's like, nah, that doesn't happen. That's not happening down here. It's not. Well, they went into a feed store. My guy owned horses. And sure enough, my friend went off looking for what he needed, and my husband's in there, and they're following my husband around the store, and the white guy is like looking around because he needs someone to help him, but they're not helping him. They're too busy following my husband around the store. And the guy was like, said to my husband afterwards, he's like, I never believed you when you would tell me these things, but I've just seen it with my own two eyes, And so, wow, it changed his thinking as well, So, yeah.
Have you guys seek any injustice, retaliation, or you just hold it all in, or you speak back on the situation? situation?
I am not a person that gets aggressive. I know my husband would have been more involved in something like that. Um, Me, I just talk. I will talk to friends, talk to them about what's happened, educate. I think the best thing to do is to help educate everyone so that we, like I said, it's about talking, about making people understand what's really going on. Like I said, my friends down here, my white friends down here, in talking to them about experiences that we've had, and they're like, but that can't be, or this is 21st century, that doesn't still happen. And then we go out and something happens and they're like, wow, so their thinking has changed and they realize that yeah, racism does exist and it happens, you know and it's a matter of getting it out, exposing it, and talking about it so that you can actually understand what's going on, so you can change the mindset, because that's what's going to have to happen.
That's true. Do you believe there's a generational difference in between racism compared to back then and now?
Yeah, I do believe older people were brought up at a different time when it was more prevalent, it was more common, it was more just everyday natural occurrence. But I think the younger generation, or I'm hoping also the younger generation, is starting to experience people of different cultures, of different races, different religions, and realizing that we can get along and that we're all humans. One of the things growing up in New York that I really loved and I share with people is the fact that I grew up in a neighborhood where, as I walked around, I heard languages from all over the planet. And listened to music from different cultures. My neighbor on one side was an old Jewish married couple. My neighbor on the other side were a brother and sister Catholic. Down the block were my friends that were from different places in the West Indies, Central America, the South. And so we all talked and were friends. And I think that experience shapes who I am, because I feel it's necessary to understand people that we just all talk. And I grew up in a very multicultural neighborhood community. And so to me, dealing with someone from a different ethnic group or different culture is normal, is accepting. I am that type of person, And I think part of the problem is when people are just in clumps and they don't have outside experiences. Like the neighborhood that I live in now, the area that I live in, those people have never been out of that area. And if they have, they've been in very sheltered resort areas, so they don't see the people around them. And so they don't have those experiences. What they see of people of color are what they see on television, those stereotypical things. And so that's all they know. I mean, when we moved up there, they were like, oh, wow, not knowing what to expect, because all they see is that. I'm a teacher and I still have students that'll come up and want to touch my hair. It doesn't offend me because I know that they're curious, they're children. And to me, what better way to teach them? Yes, my hair texture is very different than your hair texture, And so, yeah, it's okay for you to touch my hair. They're like, wow, it's soft, like a lamb. They're like, yeah. And those are things that are important, for us to be able to understand each other as people.
That's true. Do you think you could bring, or not you specifically, but do you think it's possible to bring the melting pot type of situation to Texas? Or is it only limited to New York City where it's a lot of different cultures?
Texas is going to be a rough nut to crack. You know, it's the mentality down here is very different it's the South. They still like to run around with the Confederate flag, not understanding the effect or the belief that it has on people of color when they see that. They talk about, well, this is their history. Yes, it is part of history, but that part of history is over. The South lost. Get over it. They lost. We are supposed to be the United States of America. Down here I see people walk with on their trucks with, Texas needs to succeed from the Union type stuff. This is 2019. It's not 1860. So they still have that same mentality. Some of them are able to get past that, but a lot of them, because it's generational, that's how their parents think, that's how their grandparents think, and they pass it down. And once again, I think it's because with lack of exposure to anything, they don't see anything outside of their little neighborhood, out of that clique. And so they don't have any experiences with people of color. So all they know is what they've seen, and they just continue the same idiotic thinking. I place it on ignorance, because what you don't know, you fear, and that's how they're dealing with things.
With that being said, are you hopeful for the future?
I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. I'm always hopeful. Reality is a whole nother issue right now with the present administration. It's like we're going backwards. So I can just hope that things like this bring awareness to everyone, and maybe can start a dialogue with people, so that we can possibly get past our differences and be more informed, just to be able to speak and deal with each other as people.
On a more spiritual note, are you spiritual? Like, do you go to church and stuff like that?
I have not been to church in decades.
Okay, so I'm guessing none of your faith has shaped or altered any experiences that you've had.
No.
Do you believe that the church could do more, like the black church could do more to promote more political ideas?
Yeah, I think the black church needs to be. I think we need to go back to the time where we were a community, when we had black communities and we dealt with each other. In some aspects, I think integration has broken us, because we've left our community, we've left where we were. We had businesses and we strived and we took care of each other, and we then went out. And so now we're so scattered, physically and mentally, that we don't come together. The black church, in my mind, should be the basis of where, and it's not just the black church. I think church in itself should be the basis. I do remember when I was young going to church, the church was always open. The doors were never locked. You could always walk into the church and talk to someone, or just go into the, and sit down and pray or do things. Nowadays, churches have to be locked up. That, to me, is a sin. People need to be able to have their spirituality, have their belief, and be able to go to the church. That should be the sanctuary. That should be a safe place. Church back in the day were where the community came together, where everything happened. I don't know that it still is. I don't know that the church is taking on the responsibility of the community, protecting the community, protecting everyone there, just being a place for everyone.
To wrap things up, do you think that I forgot to ask you anything that you want to speak on, or do you have a message you want to tell the young people?
All I can say is just keep talking. I think this project is a great idea. I hope that people will volunteer to speak their stories. And that's about it.